Welcome to Slight Reliability, the show where we learn about SRE and observability 1 week at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Townsend. Welcome back to Slight Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn about SRE and observability. Today I'm here with Artem Yakimenko from Culture Amp, ex-Google, SRE extraordinaire, and he's here to talk today about this idea of making reliability meaningful. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Artem, before we get underway?
Hello, Stephen. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm an engineering director of SRE at Culture Amp at the moment. And in general, like most of my career, I spent around operations and operations jobs, reliability jobs, including some time in SRE at Google, including Google Cloud Storage and customer reliability group.
Okay, so at this point in your career, are you hands-on at all as a director, or is it your time just taken up leading big teams?
So I'm actually still very technical, and what I do is I actually take support shifts from my team about like every quarter, sometimes more often, and that. Besides kind of having a little bit of fun on the tools, it also gives me some perspective of like what are the problems, like how hard it is to to service our tools, like how hard it is to service our deployments, what problems people are generally having. And I think this actually like really help. I would recommend others to do it as well.
That sounds a lot like in the Toyota way, talking about even the CEO of the company will go down to the factory floor to see what's going on, and that keeps them connected to what's going on. I like that. I think it's awesome that you still get the chance to do that as well. It must be, coming from a technical background, quite satisfying as well to get that connection.
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm also very thankful that my team has been very patient while I kind of shadowed them first to make sure that I am actually effective and not a burden in our support environment. Yeah. And so that has been pretty good.
So you proposed this topic, which I think is fantastic, about making reliability meaningful. And I've definitely seen in the last maybe 2 to 3 years, lots of SREs getting laid off around the world. And the question that comes to mind is, how do you articulate or how do you calculate the business value or impact of reliability engineering practices? And I've always thought that is literally impossible to calculate. It's just such a complex, interconnected situation that I can't see an easy way to go, well, our SREs are saving this much money or creating this much value. What are your views on it? Do you think reliability engineering, I think I know the answer, is valuable to businesses?
I think it's definitely valuable to businesses, but I think it needs to ladder up to the business and focus on reliability in places where that actually affects customers and like affects the revenue and like other business metrics. In general, I would say that there are some things that are more easily quantifiable in terms of things like uptime, in terms of things like, as we've talked a lot about in the past like 5 years, like SLAs, SLOs, and different ways to kind of track how, error budget, how to track how your systems are doing. But one of the things is that counting the human impact is actually one of the harder bits in it. However, it is definitely possible to quantify it, at least to some degree, and it is possible to have a general understanding of like how your users are doing. So one of the ways how I have done it in the past is I come originally, I started my career in support, like in the support background. So generally, I know that a lot of the user issues, they go through support and they have a lot of data on it. And what I found useful in the past is to talk to support, get a list of all the tickets and like the bodies of those tickets into like, either into a database or into a CSV file, and then go through it and look for specific keywords. So look for latency, slow, stuttering, stopped, takes like too long, is a very good like part of it. And of course, this doesn't give you a meaningful number on its own. Like, you shouldn't just like count those and then like, yep, this is a good metric. But what this will do is it will give you, from the gigantic corpus of all those tickets, this will give you a lot of tickets that are at least relevant to your area. And then what you can start doing is that it's a little bit more, I would say, like qualitative than quantitative, but you can kind of start grouping them into things. And you can start grouping them into things where sometimes you can just like fix certain things with UX. Sometimes like you can group it by services, as in like, which particular part do you think is slow. Sometimes you will kind of learn to exclude certain things or exclude certain customers, for example, because sometimes like you have like one specific customer that kind of keeps that it has like a much lower tolerance for some things. And in general, you can kind of track the because support is usually very good at interacting with people, so they often track sentiment. So what you can do is you can grab their sentiment metrics for those particular support cases and issues, and then look at how in general like they're affecting the the user sentiment over those things. Those can be different. Sometimes they're like, give us like a star rating, give us like how you're feeling about the product. Sometimes nowadays it's like even like LLM like analysis of like, hey, what was the is very positive sentiment, negative, or like or generic. And over those you will get a lot of good hints on where you can dig and actually start collecting data on what and what systems might be important here.
Okay, I love the idea of like a word cloud of like terms relating to your service.
Essentially, yeah.
And it might not be quantitative information which you can say, let's track against it, but it does sound like a compass that points you into the place to go to look. Is that kind of like what it is?
Yeah, exactly. So what it does is, let's try to pick a more concrete example. So we take a lot of people are complaining that a particular page is slow. What you can do from there is, first, it gives you an idea that, hey, there is a problem here somewhere because a lot of people are talking about it. And then you can apply our usual quantitative metrics and look at particular service, look which services serve that particular page, and then look at your current metrics. If your current metrics, for example, are not telling you anything, that is also a very good sign. That means that you might be missing something. In my experience, a lot of the times what gets missed is long tail latency. So when you have 100 customers who have a very decent experience and one customer who has horrific experience, but when you average it, it turns out that overall, the sentiment seems to be good. But the problem is that if you have even a small pool of people who have a very bad experience with your product, that means that not only from a business perspective, possible reputational damage, you also find that you probably haven't covered certain use cases well. And that means that your product is not quite optimized for those things. And this allows you to kind of dig into it and try to figure out what we can do from there. And when you do figure out those things, what helps is now, because you do have that word cloud, you can actually give tangible examples when talking to the business on why this particular service needs to be improved. And because this is tied to your customer base, what you can do is you can also start putting the contract value numbers to it. If you have like a more like tightly controlled like finance. What you can do, you can still tie like, customer ranking, because there's usually like, pro, enterprise, platinum, whatever it is, depending on the company. You can tie those things together as well. And this will allow you to argue with the business to get the resources, be it people or time or both, to do what needs to be done.
You're kind of already moving on to one of the other topics you mentioned, which is the coming together of SRE and user analytics, which is like a kind of future state idea. But I did want to, before you talk about that, I remember back in my performance testing days, which I did for many, many years, there was always this idea that it's got to take a certain amount of time, because that's what the user experience needs to be. But it's not that simple, is it? Because as you were saying, and is that you gave a good example from it, I think it was an airport, but it's the user interface is so important too, because something can be quite slow, but if you prepare the user that this thing is going to be slow and like show a loading bar and progress or something, people could be quite happy for that to take a long time, right? It's not necessarily the hard numbers and how fast it is in the background, the latency that matters. It's the whole package and how we present that to the customer. And it's quite hard to sort of, we kind of decouple these things. We go, well, I'm an SRE or I'm a performance engineer. I just focus on this, but it all needs to fit together, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Have you ever seen that come together?
Yeah, definitely. There was a word from, I think, one of the Google UX folks, which was, if you have good enough UX, you can even manipulate time. And so that is actually coming from very old feature. If you still remember the first days of like Mac OS like X, and you remember there was the pulsing progress bars. And the interesting bit is that they actually did the study, and if a person sees the same progress bar that is just flat, and the other one that has this like pulsing effect on it, the person who sees the pulsing one thinks that it takes on average like 20% less or something close to that. Our minds are, at the end of the day, they have a way that they like perceive the physical world, and it is not directly connected to the to the actual facts. So this way you can definitely do a lot of things that will make users' life easier without actually changing the underlying system that much. So one of the things is as we've discussed, if you prepare the customer for something to take a bit versus you just freeze the page and wait until it loads, that is already a much better experience. Another thing is that we can take from the field of graceful degradation, as when you have a page, for example, with like Amazon. If you click on the like web tools while you load the like a page of an Amazon product, you will see that the page is combined from a lot of different responses from different services. So like the reviews are a separate service, the rating is like a separate service, the like additional description is also like added from a service, like products are a separate service. And what that does is if you focus on what the person needs the most, and you serve that first. So for example, I am interested in buying a particular thing. So as long as I see the item, I see the basic description, and I see the buy button, for 80% of users, this will already be enough. And everything else, it can either take a longer time to load. It might not load at all. But the reliability of a key user journey of I'm looking for an item that I need, I found the item, I bought it, is the most important one. And that should be prioritized over others.
I love the idea of graceful degradation. I think probably retail does it quite well. A lot of other industries that I've worked in, not so much, and I see opportunities for it. It could be as simple as, something is down. There's an outage on a component. Maybe because I work in insurance, hypothetical example, you go to a quote and buy site and you want to get a quote for your insurance, and there's something broken about the pricing engine. We can give you a quote, but we actually can't reach our reference data right now. But we can give you an approximate quote, which is still probably enough for you to make a decision.
Yep.
Kind of thing. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or, for example, you like our credit card payment processor is currently not working, go and instead we can offer the moto payment by phone, or alternative alternative providers and things like that.
Yeah, I am actually really fascinated by the psychology, like you were saying before about the macOS X flowing bar and how people perceive it. It reminds me of people on their phones. It's maybe when your brain is stimulated, time seems to go faster. So you're on your phone looking at Instagram Reels or something, and next thing is like, what? An hour's gone by. What happened? It's a little bit like that. I'm fascinated by that and the perception of time versus the reality of time.
There is a very good book which is designed for UX people first and foremost, and also for I would say design community in general. But I found it actually very useful, and it is called "100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People." And it goes and talks about how, what biases do we have when we perceive the world in terms of how red things turn to attract people's attention a little bit more, how contrast works, how what how slow does something need to be for a person to perceive it as slow, which is about 300 milliseconds. So if something takes longer than 300 milliseconds, usually as 300 milliseconds of wait time, that is usually perceived as slow already. So it's no longer the so-called snappy when we talk about interfaces or something like that.
Yeah, going back to the idea of business value, one of the things we talked about a couple of weeks ago was, how great would it be to be able to plot, if you're a company or you have a service which is selling something, maybe an app that sells some product online, being able to see how much money you're making each hour. But then what happens when the finance team says, no, you can't look at that information? How is there any way that we could get that financial, the business impact of the money coming in, so that we could track that? Because there could be, that's the true test, right? If something's broken, no one's going to be able to buy anything,
Definitely. And that is a problem that I had to work with in the past. Is a lot of my career I spent in very, very big companies, and in many of those, no, finance will generally not give you the list of how much is every account earning. And even if they do, they might give it out individually with high level approval, but you will not be able to easily share it. You will have to go around with people and saying that, oh, hey, but you need to file a ticket to access this or something like that. But you want it to be as available as possible. So what you can do is you can make derivative metrics that do not show the actual monetary value that is usually extremely sensitive, and that still give you an idea of what importance that relative customer, for example, has. So one of the things that I've found to be successful in the past is you can always ask finance or whoever maintains your financial dashboards to not produce you the actual numbers, but ask for a ranking, as in rank all the customers of this particular product in this sales channel from one to to whatever number is, and or at least give me the top 10,000 or something like that, and ask to produce only the numbers and put it in some different table or spreadsheet, etc., with less controls on it. And what that allows you to do is you can now group customers by importance. So you can say group first 10 customer, top 10 customer buckets, top 100, top 500, top 1,000 customers, right? And then when you are trying to fix a certain problem, this actually works both for SRE and for support. You can go to the business and say, look, this particular issue is happening to at least, 5 out of our top 10 customers. This is so this is very important to us. or this is happening to like 20% of our like top 100 customers, and this is why it's important. And because it is tied directly to the revenue, the business, it's much easier to explain that to the business. Another way how you can do it is you can grab whatever customer ranking you have in your internal like CRM, like Salesforce or like HubSpot, etc. You will usually have like at least tier levels of like, we have top like enterprise customers, pro customers, etc. And that will already give you some idea. So you can again say that, hey, 5% of all of our enterprise customers are having issues with this, or every second, like, every third pro customer is having issues with this, and this is why it's important for us to look at.
In episode 75, I talked to Steve McGee, another Google SRE. I think he's more of an advocate now, who mentioned that from his perspective, the other value that you maybe can't measure of SRE is that teams who are applying SRE practices are by default building good stuff, which helps you just build better products and services, which is a bit hard to measure, I think. But do you agree with that by applying those kinds of principles that you actually build better software in the first place?
I would say yes, because as people at the end of the day, like very like operational role, we in our careers have seen a lot of things fail in a lot of very different ways, and because of that, we have kind of like a troubleshooting tree in our head that we can always like apply to a new piece of software, a new product, and have a think about what from that, like, from our past experience, like can apply to it. And a lot of those things affect the end user. So for example, if you don't think about isolation well, you will have problems that are affecting like one user, affecting the entire cohort that is running on the same either like cell or server or like whatever your kind of unit of separation is. A good way to think about it is not only in terms of, well, this thing doesn't fail or this thing is more reliable, but you can also think about it in a way that this thing is more performant. And performance is actually relatively easily quantifiable in financial terms, especially if you are in a much kind of like larger company. If you are able to optimize something to take up 10% less RAM, that can turn into a very, very big figure very, very quickly. And that is another thing that I think is a part of like SRE's area is performance and being able to affect it well, being able to quantify it well. And another thing I think that while we're talking about those things tied to the business and finance, it's capacity planning as well. It is very important in general for the business to understand, or like how much are we going to spend on this particular like infrastructure, or like how much are we spending per user. And I think or how much are we spending per like a particular contract or something like that. And those things can be very, very useful as well, because they will allow the company to assign the right resources to it and avoid kind of mid-year surprises when something is like costing like much more than it is. And the thing is that a lot of the times we think with kind of, especially like us in a kind of like in a more engineering position, we sometimes think about finance as a kind of an adversarial relationship, as in like those are the people that are counting what you're doing, and and trying to see to make sure that you like fit your budgets and things like that. But the thing is that you're actually all in the same boat, and what they're trying to do is they are not, in general, finance is not trying to hound you and make sure that you spend as little as possible on X or something like that. The only thing they want to know is how much are we going to, like, how much do you need, how much do you want to spend, and allocate that money, and about the accuracy of that allocation. And so what you can do is, if you kind of understand those bits, then your relationship can actually be very, very fruitful, because you will be able to you will be able to get the resources that you need, and finance gets the confidence that they can trust you, that this is the amount you need.
To your first point, something I've learned from another ex-Google SRE, Liz Fong Jones, is around if you're on public cloud, make sure that you are continually checking the new, if you're, say, doing infrastructure as a service, trying out the new EC2 instances and checking the performance of those, because they continually get better over time, and you can save enormous amounts of money. But you have to understand what's coming, and then be performance testing and making and checking, what the benefits are. Because if you can save 30% on compute or memory, that's huge, right?
Yeah, it is
Everyone loves
definitely.
that.
And nowadays, I would say with like alternative CPU architectures, so like Graviton on AWS, those are very, very substantial savings without like much of a hit to performance. And one thing I think why this is so important is sometimes we have biases from kind of the real tangible world that transfer with us into digital, but that do not actually make a lot of sense in like in a digital world. So, for example, when you have like a pay per hour compute service, it is not the same thing as you like owning like an old school server. So, but a lot of people think that, hey, if something is older, then this is usually cheaper, so it is going to like it's going to like benefit me overall, and it's going to be cheaper. But what people forget sometimes is that it is also slower and has worse thermal profile. So per unit of compute, you often actually spend more on the older instances than on the new ones. And you only start noticing it when you actually do some analysis and see that, oh, hey, like, why do we need, why is, are the, containers like in this group, why are there so many instances compared to that group? And then you understand that the difference is in performance, because the other one can actually fit like more at the same time.
And that's not even to mention the fact that if you have physical servers, someone's got to look after the infrastructure, and that costs money and time and complexity. Yeah.
Definitely, I wouldn't say though that it is like a hard and fast rule. I think it all depends on the type of your like workloads and the size of your company. Generally, I would say if you have like a very, very specific workload that is very well planned, that can be like capacity planned like for the next like year or like 2 years, and you are a company of like 20,000 like plus employees, it might make sense to actually run some things on like physical hardware, and it might actually save you some money, even with all the like the paying someone to service the colo, like to change your disk shelves from time to time, etc. But you need to very like you need to always calculate the trade-offs well, because if it is something where you're running an experiment and you don't know like the demand, you don't know like the profile of things, etc., then the startup, like the initial like investment costs on all of those things, they're like way too high for like for something that you don't know which will work. So a good example nowadays would be GPU things. So it will, in certain cases, if you have like a very like predictable into the future like set of GPU workloads, then it might at some points make sense to have a bit in your kind of like a local like a local environment. Also, another thing is kind of very intense compute workers. For example, like if we talk about like either math like or statistics, and that this is like an underlying function of your business that you will see well into the future, that's when it makes sense. So I think it's not a, most people should definitely, especially if you're just starting out, you definitely should use something like something serviced on cloud. As the company grows, you might need different things, and sometimes it makes sense to do things on-prem. Also, there are some interesting things happening in the market in there. So, for example, one of them is the Oxide Computer Company, which is people that are working on essentially data center in a box type of solution. So you essentially just have a like a very strongly like vertically integrated solution that just provides you essentially with a cube cluster, if I remember correctly, and everything else is like very like easily like self-service. They're still only starting out, but they look actually pretty promising.
I'm going to put you on the spot. One last question here. You haven't had a chance to prepare for this, but let's say somewhere out there's an SRE manager or maybe a senior SRE, and in their organization, they're feeling a bit vulnerable that they might lose that role, or that part of the company might get dissolved. How might they go about articulating the value of SRE?
I would say that we can have two ways to show value, right? So one is the showing value already delivered, and one of them is like value projected like into the future. If we are talking about retention, usually what is important is both. So you need not to only say that, hey, this particular thing will will help the business, but also here is how we have been effective at like helping the business. So in general, I would say is look at your project portfolio, look at your or if you, for example, are more of a like consulting type of SRE, look at your like list of like previous teams that you worked with, like things that you have achieved. The sometimes like people quantify those like in tickets as well if they're more of a like a consulting type of SRE as well, and look into those from a perspective of the business. So first, look at the services that bring the company the most revenue. If you don't know which services are bringing the company the most revenue, it is a good thing to like to either find that information or like ask around until you get that information, and then start looking at how you have measurably affected it. So sometimes you can show that, hey, thanks to this, like our you can show like our like uptime, and if you have a like a constant constant revenue type of company, so like something that clips every ticket essentially, so like a payment processor, you can basically check the revenue per a certain period of time, then put that onto the outages and show how hopefully the you are affecting them positively and there's less outages in the time that you have an outage and the impact of them is lower. So that way you can easily show that, hey, this is the amount of money that we lose like every minute while we're down, not even talking about like reputational damages and and customer unhappiness. And here is how that has saved us like X amount of like money, for example. And sometimes it is not only about money, it is also about like reputation as well. And we can say that if you had a lot of, for example, like near misses that your good work has like saved from, you can show some examples of companies in the in the industry, in the news, that have like made us like a similar mistake, and show kind of the level of the damage that has caused. So, but in general, it is always arm yourself with data. Anything like any data is better than it's better than nothing, and anecdotes are also better than nothing, but data and anecdotes together can be very powerful in explaining the value of the service that you provide.
Thank you so much, Artem, for your time today. I really appreciate it. Really good to hear about your experiences, and I think this is a It's a good topic. This is actually the same kind of topic that Niall Murphy wanted to talk about around about the end of last year. He was also struggling to figure out how do we articulate the value. And I think he thought that as SREs we needed to be better at doing that. And I think this is a great thing to discuss. And it sounds like you've gone quite a long way down that journey, which I think all of us need to go on. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
And to everyone else, thank you once again for tuning in to Slight Reliability. Hope you all have a wonderful week and that you're not suffering, you're not battling through painful incidents. And I'll see you next time.